Hello, this is Dr. James Camp from Lee College in Baytown, Texas, and welcome to my new series on starting off in C++. Our lesson 1, this is for people who are new to programming and for people who maybe have programmed before but are new to C++ as a language. Our first lesson is going to be on input and output. We'll learn to do input and output with the console and also with a simple text file. Okay, if you've read even the first chapter of your C++ textbook or the first page of an online C++ tutorial, you've probably seen some version of the Hello World program. It's got a pound include line, it's got an int main line, and it's got this output line with these funky abbreviations for standard cout, standard inline. We're going to go through those one item at a time and help you break down the parts of a C++ program. Okay, this first line is called a pound include because it starts with a pound sign and includes the word include. And it's just there to import code from another file. Mostly we're going to be using this to import code from the standard library. C++ is a very modular language. It doesn't even include input-output operators in the main language. That's because you don't always use input and output to the console when you write a C++ program. If you're writing a C++ program to run, say, the embedded chip on a smart thermostat, you're not going to have a computer console to read data from or write data to. So you're going to use a different form of input and output. So C++ gives you that option to not include bits of code that you don't need. We are going to be reading and writing from the console, so we're going to use the IOStream library. Now, IOStream is the name of the input-output stream library. Okay, it contains the code C++ needs for console I/O. A console is a screen that contains only text. Okay, you'll see several examples of these in today's, several screenshots from consoles in today's presentation. The basic idea is that a console is an older form of, almost an ancient at this point, form of computer interaction. Today everybody expects windows and buttons and menus and pictures. But back in the early days of computing, all you had on your desk was a screen that printed text characters and read more text characters from the keyboard. And that's what a console is, and that's how we're going to be doing input and output in this class. Main, the next thing you see here is a function. It starts with the word int. That's a return type. That's another legacy from the old days of computing, that your main program was expected to return a code to the operating system that was either 0 if everything went fine or some error code if everything hadn't gone fine. Today, most people don't even write the return statement at the end of their C++ programs. But main is a function that all C++ programs have. Okay, every C++ program, C and C++, C++ inherits this from the C language. All C and C++ code is organized into functions. Okay, you might have just the main function for a simple program, or you might have dozens of specific functions that do specific things. You'll learn how to write other functions besides main in about 3 lessons or so. But every program, every C++ program has a main function, and this is where the program starts. Cout is an object, okay? Objects are self-contained bits of code that bundle data and the methods for interacting with that data. So in this case, the data is an output stream that is destined to be written to the console, and the methods for interacting with it involve these funny little arrows made of less than signs. Cout stands for console output, okay, the C and the out. In the early days of writing C and C++ programs, the amount of memory that the computer had to manage your code while compiling it was fairly limited, and so they tried to abbreviate as many things as possible to keep from using extra characters. Also, you were typing your code on a old slow console that was probably sending every character over essentially a telephone line to the computer, which was in somebody else's room, probably took up an entire room in another part of the building. And then it was sending back output to your console. So again, you didn't want to type unnecessary characters. So standard got abbreviated STD, and console output got abbreviated Cout, and endline turned into ENDL. ENDL is what we call an output manipulator. It stands for end line, and it does exactly that. It both ends your line of output and forces that line to be written to the console. So every time, again, in old school computing, to save characters being sent back and forth along those telephone lines, the computer would not write text to the console until it knew that you were done writing. And so you sent this end line symbol to force the computer to write that whole line to the console and go on to the next line. Okay. Now what about this funny colon thing here? This is what C++ calls the scope operator. It tells C++ what scope to look for a particular name in. In this case, it's a kind of scope called a namespace. Okay. And all of the standard library objects and functions and types live in the standard namespace. Okay, that's what STD stands for, is standard library. It does not mean sexually transmitted disease, no matter how much we may have been indoctrinated to read it that way these days. We can get rid of these standard colons by adding a simple line of code under our pound include lines, the line using namespace standard. So let's go ahead and do that. There it is. That looks better, doesn't it? Using namespace is a set of keywords that tells the compiler to look for any names it doesn't recognize in the namespace that you provide. In this case, the STD or standard namespace. We're going to be including the using namespace standard line in all of our programs in this class because I hate typing standard colon in front of all of these various types and objects and operators. It's kind of funny that C++ even makes you do this, but the reasoning is that they thought maybe you want to write your own variable called cin or your own variable called cout, and in that case you can keep the ones in the standard namespace by giving them the standard colon in front of them, and then your cin and cout could do something completely different. Okay, and finally, what about this little less than sign? The less than is called the insertion operator. Okay, it inserts data into an output stream. Some people also call it the output operator. So what this says is we're taking the text hello world and we're inserting it into the output stream console output. Okay, note that most lines of code in C family languages end with a semicolon. Okay, some like pound include and int main don't. Okay, you're going to learn where you don't put a semicolon as you go, but for now, assume that any line of code that you write is going to need to end with a semicolon. Okay, Now we can finally talk about what this program does. Okay, it's a one-line program that sends a string of text to the console output and then ends the output line. That's it. Very simple program. Here's the hello world output. You run the program, you get a simple single line of output that says hello world. Exactly what we asked for. That's one of the things that you will learn about computers in this course, is that they're not very creative. They do exactly what we ask them to do, even if that's not exactly what we meant for them to do. They're going to do exactly as we tell them. Okay, so let's work on a more advanced hello program. We don't just want to say hello to the world, we want to say hello to a particular user. So we need to do some input to find out the user's name. We've done output, let's add the skill of doing input. In order for our program to know the user's name, we need somewhere to store that information. And the place where we store information in a C++ program, or really any computer program, is a variable. Okay, a variable is a named memory location. It can hold a number, such as an int or a double. It can hold a single character, or it can hold more complicated data, like an array, which is, you can think of as a list of values, a struct, which is a value that bundles together different kinds of values, like a student's ID and their GPA might be bundled together, for example. Or an object, okay, which, as we said, are these little subprograms that bundle together data and the methods for working with that data. C++ has a string type that is an object that holds a string of text characters. That string of text can be as short or as long as you need it to be. You don't have to set a particular size for it. But we do need to pound include the string library to use it. So let's see what this program looks like. Okay, you can see the pound include string line that we've added up at the top, and you can see here that I'm declaring a variable called username. The way you declare, well, okay, first off, in C++, if you've never used a compiled language before, maybe you have some experience doing Python programming or JavaScript. In C++, like most compiled languages, you have to declare a variable before you can use it, because the compiler has to set aside memory space for that variable. You have to give the variable a type. You can't just say username or even var username, as nice as that would be. We have to know ahead of time what kind of data we're going to be storing in this variable. So we know we're going to hold a string of text, so we give it the type string, and then we give it the name username. Now you'll note that variable names can contain letters, user, name. They can contain numbers, we haven't done that in this case, and they can contain the underscore character, which you get by hitting Shift and the dash key on your keyboard up near the backspace. That's it. You can't have any punctuation marks, you can't have any special characters, you can't use funky symbols, and you can't start with a number. You couldn't put 8 users, you'd have to put user 8 or something. Okay. Before you take input from the console, it is polite, in fact it's usually necessary, to prompt the user with an output statement. Okay, so you have to tell the user what they need to type. Otherwise, they're staring at a blank screen in front of them with a cursor that's demanding that they enter some input, and they don't know what input to type. In this case, we simply prompt, "What is your name?" And notice that we leave a space after the question mark. It looks pretty awful on a screen if you have to start typing right after the end of the prompt. So it's nice to leave a space there so the user has some room. It doesn't look as cramped on screen. Okay. Normally for input we use cn with a greater than sign, very much an analogy to the cout with the less than sign. The less than, and the greater than are supposed to look like arrows that show the direction of information flow. The information is being inserted into cout. It's being extracted from cin. Normally we use cin with the extraction operator to read input one item at a time. Okay. The greater than operator will read until it finds white space, a space or a tab or a return key, and then it stops reading. But we want to read the user's whole name. Maybe they want to type Bartholomew Smithers or something like that. The string library provides us a way to read a whole line at a time called getline. So you type getline and then the name of the stream that you're reading from, in this case cin, and then a comma, and then the name of the variable that you want to read the line of input into. Note for the output that you can chain as many of these less than output insertion operators in a row as you need to build an output line. You can also space them over multiple lines if you need to. You could do cout hello less than username and then put a semicolon and then start a new line that said cout less than exclamation point less than endline. Until you have the endline operator, it's going to keep building the same line of output. So it doesn't matter how many output statements you break that into. So here's how our new hello world program works. Okay, it says, what is your name? I type Jimmy Cool, and it says, hello, Jimmy Cool. It doesn't care that that's not actually my name. It just does what I tell it to do. Okay, so let's go a little bit more, one more step more advanced and write a little diary app. Okay, we want the user to type a short diary entry and we're going to save it as a file. This sounds hard because you haven't written to a file before in C++, but it actually just uses the same skills we've been learning. All we need to know is how to open a file and attach it to an output stream object. Cout is an output stream object. There's also a class of objects called OFStream, which stands for output file stream. Okay, one more of those little abbreviations. Objects often have member functions that you call with dot notation. Okay, string has member functions like dot length or dot substring. OFStream has a member function called dot open that lets you open a file and attach it to your OFStream object so you can write to it. And then we're going to write to it using the same insertion operator that we've been using with cout. So the way the output works will look just like what you've done before. So first, we need to declare a number of string variables. We can actually declare multiple variables on a single line by separating them with commas. So string, as long as they're the same type of variable. Okay, if I had some strings and some numbers, I'd have to put them on separate lines. But I can have string username, date, time, entry, file name, all on the same line. These variables will hold the user's name, the date and time, the actual journal entry, and then a file name that we're going to use to save the journal data. Then we're going to get the user's name exactly as we did before, nothing new there. Then we get the date and time string from a custom function that I wrote. Okay, this is more advanced programming than you know what to do with today, so I'm going to show it to you in this presentation, but I'm going to fill you in about how to do it in a few lessons down the road. We use the user's name and the date time string to build a unique file name. Note that you can just, in some languages, you have to call special functions to concatenate strings. In C++, you can just use the plus operator and it will concatenate the bits of the string together into one longer string. Then we get the journal entry itself. Same way we did for the name, we give a prompt, write a brief journal entry below. This time we're going to put an end line at the end of the prompt because we want the person to start typing their journal entry on a blank line. And then we're going to call getline to get the entire entry. As long as the user doesn't hit return, they can type as many characters as they want, and that'll all come in as one brief journal entry. Okay, now it's time to write the file. We have to create the file object and then open a file for it to write to. So OFStream is the object type or class, and we use that to create a file called a variable called outFile. Then we send the file name we've already built on the previous page to outFile.open, and that will find a file, find a place on the disk to write that file, give it the name that we've set for it, and open that file for writing. Now by default, this is going to go in the same folder as your program, so you may have to dig through several folders on your hard drive to find this file. It's not going to go in your documents folder or any kind of logical place. We use the same output operator, less than, that we've been using with cout. So we say output file, less than, username, less than, we add parentheses S, journal entry 4, and then we add the date time, and then we send an end line. Then, on a new line, we're going to send the user's journal entry to the output file. It's a very short file. It just contains a heading and a journal entry, and then finally we close that file with outFile.close. So here's the complete code for the diary app. It starts with a #define. This is a way to send, in this case, this is a way to send messages to the compiler. And Microsoft's compiler does not like old-fashioned C code like the kind that I have to use to get the date and time. So you have to #define this specific compiler message, CRT secure no warnings, to get it to use old-fashioned C code, such as what I'm using in the get time string function that I wrote. Then you can see I'm including the IOStream library, the string library, the fstream, and to get the date and time, I'm including a ctime library. There are a whole host of functions that start with the letter C in the C++ library. Those are libraries that are imported with almost without any changes from the standard C language that C++ inherits from. These do not use the std : notation. They just, all of their functions are just dropped into your program as is. And then we've got the using namespace standard so that I don't have to type that all over the place. This is my function for getting the time and date. You can see there are some new types, timet and struct tm star. There's a character type. The time string is actually an array that has 80 characters in it. We have to pass raw time to the time function and then pass it again to the local time to convert it to our time zone. And then finally there's a string. str means string in the C++, in the standard C library. String format time that lets you print the time as a string. Okay. Then I just return that time string to the program that calls this function. Like I said, if none of this code on this page makes sense to you at this point, that's probably appropriate. You're not at this level of programming yet. But if you are a programmer with a pointy hat that's so tall, then you can look back at this and try to figure out how it all works. Okay. Then here's our complete code for the diary program. We get the user's name, we say hello, we create the file name with the date and time, and we tell the user to write a brief journal entry. Then we create an OF stream, open it, write the header, write the entry, and close the file. The console output looks like this. It says, what is your name? I type my name. It says, hello. It tells me to write a brief journal entry. I say something kind of boring, and then I hit return, and it saves it to a file without telling me that it's doing anything. Now that's probably a bad interface error there, that I should have put something saying writing to file or something as a final output. And then this is what the file itself looks like if I open it in Notepad. It has James Camp's journal entry and the date and time string. And then it has the fairly boring journal entry that I typed on its own line there. So in summary, what we've learned today is the basic parts of a C++ program, how to declare and name variables of type string and OF stream. You give the type name and then the variable name. We've learned what's legal for a variable name, that it can contain letters, numbers, and an underscore character, and that's it. We learned how to write console output, and we learned how to write to an output file. And we learned how to read an entire line of text from the console. We'll learn how to read individual numbers or characters in probably next time. Okay. So this is a good time to practice writing your own program that reads some input from the console, writes some output to the console. Maybe you can extend the journal program to be a little mini psychiatrist that says, tell me about your day, and then it has another line that says, and tell me how you feel about that, and then it records that also in the file. You can do whatever you want, but practice your skills here. If you're in my class, I'll probably have an actual assignment for you at this point. Okay, good luck, happy programming, and I hope you come back for my next lesson.